Hello, team, and welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MSP. This is the Ukraine War News Update for the 16th of May 2023. Let's get straight to it. Go to the usual starting point, the Ukrainian general staff figures for the Russian losses for the day before. All the usual caveats apply. 520 liquidated personnel, there or thereabouts, kind of average, I guess, at the moment. Although it's above the year-long or year and a bit long whole war average, it's still below where we have seen it at the height of offensives, about half of what these sort of top line figures have been at their worst for the Russians. So that's the context. 3 tanks, 12 APCs. So 12 APCs is a big loss. 13 artillery systems, again another high number, not in the 20s as we've seen for the previous 3 days. Now, one thing I do wonder about artillery systems, I mean, it's a bit of a vague term. Some viewers might know more than me here, but would it include just basic mortar units? I don't know. Just a mortar. Would that be included in an artillery system tally? I'm not sure, but we have seen. I mean, I've seen loads of footage of artillery systems being taken out. I keep talking about how the Ukrainians are explicitly targeting these on a daily, nightly basis as a way of softening the battlefield before counter-offensives take place, but also just in general, they are one of the most important things to take out because they cause the most damage. 12 Ute drones, 14 vehicles and fuel tanks, 3 pieces of special equipment. Again, special equipment can cover a wide range of things. I saw a camera, basically a camera on a very tall mast, well, not that tall. What was quite surprising, I really should dig that out and try and show it to you. You've got a surveillance camera just kind of in a tree line in the middle of fields, and you wouldn't know it's there. It's that like the same height as trees. It's just incredible spotting of the drones to acquire that target, and then a couple of shells later, and it is no more. And I wonder whether just that simple camera on a stick, camera on a mast would be included in special equipment. I mean, it's not a huge bit of kit. It's not a wheeled piece of equipment, but it is still I guess, a piece of special equipment. Anyway, those are the figures. So fairly average, but still quite high for artillery systems and APCs. Okay, the biggest bit of news, and this is huge news, so this will be the biggest bit of news today, the missile strikes last night. Now, around 3:30 a.m. on May the 16th, 2023, so that's early this morning, Russia launched a massive missile attack on Ukraine. 6 X-47 M2 Kinzhal. So these are daggers. These are the hypersonic missiles that have never been shot down before, and then one was shot down the other day, and wreckage of that missile was found, and it was verified to be a Kinzhal, which is supposed to be these missiles that can't be shot down. Well, now that the US and other nations have provided Patriot missile systems to Ukraine, we are starting to see a much more effective air defense network. Now, not only that, but 9 caliber missiles and 3 S-300 or Iskander M were also launched and taken out. This is apparently a 100% hit interception ratio, which is phenomenal. But even more so because 6 of them were hypersonic ballistic missiles and 3 of them were S-300 surface-to-air missiles used in ground-to-ground mode, which also have a trajectory that that Ukraine have been unable to intercept. Now they are able to take them out. So this is really significant, and then a bunch of drones as well. Apparently, they were sent from all different directions. There is video footage of what looks like a Patriot. Have I got it in my? No, I don't think I've got it. But there's a video footage of the Patriot firing off, and someone saying, actually, this many missiles at $5 million a pop is a really expensive way to defend. It's damned if you do, damned if you don't. You either let those missiles in and destroy parts of your capital, or you spend a lot of money on expensive missiles to take them out. So, weighing this all up, it's a shame that they have to use these super expensive Patriot missiles to defend their capital, but that's what you got to do to defend your capital, right? As Ukraine battle map says here, 18 out of 18 missiles were taken out. That's significant. So not only one hypersonic missile being taken out by Patriot, we've now got a further 6 in one night, shot from those would be launched from the air. But I believe that I don't know whether it's the drones or whether it's missiles as well coming from different directions, really testing out the Ukrainian air defense, and the Ukrainian air defense came out on top. However, the flip side is that whatever, what goes up must come down. When you shoot and take out and intercept these missiles, then they still have to come down. So all 18 of those missiles would have fallen in and around Kyiv, and as well, probably a bunch of air defense missiles that missed their targets. You can imagine are still going to have to come down somewhere. These still caused damage, and fires had to be put out, so on and so forth. It was challenging, but nonetheless, these missiles didn't, explode, releasing their payload at their target. So that's fantastic for Ukraine. Now, as soon as stuff like this happens, the Russians say the same kind of thing. So Vladimir Novikov, a pro-Russian militia leader and commander of a Troy detachment, says that according to preliminary information, a Patriot air defense system and radar were destroyed in a Kyiv district. Vladimir is applying for the position of Konashenkov. So it's the idea that you get these wild claims that are testing the waters of credibility, I guess. Yeah, this plays well to the domestic audience. They'll be like, yeah, we've taken out a Patriot. It's almost certainly complete nonsense, this. And lots of people have been taking the mickey out of open source people who have been spreading these unquestioningly, right? So just beware when you hear these claims, and there'll be pro-Russian sources in the threads probably doing this as well today. Just it's almost certainly not true, although there's a non-zero chance it is true, of course. We had this, and I didn't report this straight away, but we had this after the Storm Shadow shot the other day. Straight away, the Russians claimed they shot down a Storm Shadow in midair, and then yesterday they came out and said they'd shot down a Su-57 multi-role fighter. So these are super modern fighters over eastern Ukraine, conducting a shootdown of a Ukrainian Su-24M tactical bomber that was possibly carrying British Storm Shadow missiles. This is OSINT Defender, sometimes rather unquestioning. He's one of the unquestioning ones. I read on the internet that and people taking the mickey because he is spreading stuff that is someone just saying, I read on the internet. So, well, more good news, says this pro-Russian source. I read on the internet that the Su-57 is drawing another beautiful star in the fuselage today. And if the Su-24 Kokhlov was with a couple of storms on board, then this is doubly good news. Again, that's an if it had storms on board, then this is good news. The Russian Ministry of Defense and other army officials have claimed that the Su-57 has been used in air-to-air and air-to-ground capacity multiple times during the war in Ukraine, receiving several red stars for kills earned through, though so far there's been no evidence of this. So these, as I say, Su-57 are the super modern fighters that they're not really using. Everyone's been like, where are your modern fighters? But apparently they have used them a few times. UK Defence Ministry also reported early in the war that there was some evidence the Su-57 may have been used for combat operations in Ukraine, but but if it was, it stays in the Russian airspace to avoid being shot down by Ukrainian combat aircraft and air defense. So there were claims earlier in the war that Su-57s have been used, but they are really cautious. In fact, the VKS, the Russian Air Force, is in general really cautious in the way it does its activities, staying often behind their own lines by quite a distance. They have the advantage in that they've got longer range air-to-air missiles, so that means that they can be a little bit safer, and the Ukrainians have to come to them type thing if they want to engage in air-to-air, which they really don't want to the Ukrainians because they don't have the range advantage. So, the Russians will generally win those engagements. Did a Su-57 take down a Russian Su-24 with Storm Shadow missiles on board? Probably not, but again, might have happened. Right, I'm going to move on to sort of establishing some meat on the bones for those claims in the general staff figures. just want to talk to this idea that drones are being used massively by the Ukrainians. There appears to be a massive uptick of drone usage. I think we're starting to see all of these drones filter through from United 24, from all these different escadrone, all these different entities that are providing drones for the Ukrainians in a way that isn't happening for the Russians. And you'll start to see so much footage, and also the usage of these is interesting because this report, Russian media report, that last night an unknown drone in the Kursk region in Russia dropped 3 rounds of ammunition on a border control building. 5 border guards received shrapnel wounds and were hospitalized. Whether that's true, I don't know. But I've seen recently that they are starting to use drones across the border in a way that you'd see drones be used on a front line. So not just sort of kamikaze drones or long range drones being sent to, I don't know, take out an airfield or do this and that, but actually, dropping IEDs potentially. Again, there's going to be psyops, there's going to be information flowing from both sides, but I just get a sense that the drone usage is more varied than it has previously been. Commander for the ground forces of the Ukrainian Armed Forces, Sursky, showed the work of 45 OABR in the Bakhmut direction. The enemy's cannon and ammunition warehouse were effectively destroyed. Now, this is to say that there's quite a lot of footage, as I keep saying, of the artillery pieces being taken out. And this suggests that I literally just muted you. Don't do this to me. Give me a day off. Um, so here we have, yes, an old howitzer, but it has been neutralized, and along with it, a bunch of ammunition. We are seeing an awful lot of footage of this kind of stuff happening, which gives credibility to the general staff claims about the number of artillery pieces taken out. So that is in the Bakhmut direction. In fact, I just picked, not arbitrarily, but there's so much to pick from. Here's one on the Zaporizhia front, again showing that the Ukrainians are targeting artillery pieces. Here we have a couple. You can see three somewhat protected pieces of mechanized equipment there for the Russians in the tree lines, and that's obviously taken out by, you can see, by Ukrainian artillery counter battery fire. So there you go. That kind of footage. That's Zaporizhia, destruction of two S5 Gietzint S152mm self-propelled guns, so on and so forth. That's Zaporizhia. So we had Bakhmut, Zaporizhia, and then I think there are. I didn't get the other one. There's some Kherson ones as well. But this is another bit of drone activity. There should be a Kherson one. I've neglected to include it. Right. I was trying to show you a cross section. I find this interesting as a bit of footage to show two things. One, the use of incendiary IEDs being dropped, and what damage that can do. I have not seen this before. I've seen thermobaric IEDs dropped through hatches in a vehicle and blowing up the vehicle really successfully. I've not seen this, but then also look at the wire mesh on top of the trench. So we have a drone dropping ammunition on a trench. I don't know whether they realize that there is netting on top of it or not, but they drop an ID nonetheless to try and take out the trench, and this goes to show adaptation of the Russians here, that bounce off the side and then explodes there. You can see the fire spread right down the trench. Imagine how challenging that would be for people in the trench. But then look at that. You've got wire netting. Now, that's not very useful for being able to get out of. It's very defensive. It doesn't allow you to actually get out of the trench and shoot very easily and do anything. It kind of almost imprisons you in there. But the idea is that the Russians are adapting. Okay. Other hits going on the front line. Tokmak overnight appears to, or right now, actually not overnight, today, is being hit. So that is in the Zaporizhia region on the way down to Melitopol from the front line. Most of you know where that is if you've been looking at my maps for the last 6 months. And Crimea was hit yesterday. Series of explosions reportedly in occupied Fradiska in central Crimea. A large airbase is located near there, so the Ukrainians are softening the region. I mean, there's any number of places I could show you, but you get the idea. It just gives you an indication that that kind of activity is taking place. Meanwhile, there are also so there were explosions yesterday in Luhansk. There's also partisan activity taking place. Here we have the work of Ukraine's resistance, maybe an assassination attempt on the so-called LPR Minister of Internal Affairs, Igor Kornet. He and 5 others were injured. An explosion in occupied Luhansk happened in a hairdresser's where the minister was a regular. It was reported to be a grenade, but local police now think it's an IED that caused the blast. And there's footage coming out of that. He was blown up. He's in intensive care. Here, even the invaders themselves write that they most likely blew up their own. Cornet is a thug, marauder, and murderer. So there are some claims that actually that was an internal situation rather than definitely being partisans, pro-Ukrainian partisans. But who knows? Right. Fighter bomber says, again, this is going back to the previous person who was quoted earlier, talking about the Su-57. Fighter bomber says Russian MOD is still silent about the 5 planes and helis taken down on Saturday, suggests it could easily be a friend or foe system malfunction since few Ukrainian systems, if any, could take down 5 vehicles in 2 minutes. Says the situation is bad in any case, as no one will be willing to take responsibility and no one will be punished because there is no war. There's still lots to talk about these 5 aircraft taken out in one day, and then one the day before in Crimea. But these 5 in Russia, and I was listening to Ukraine the latest saying that they were, or Dom Nichols was saying, he's very much favours this being a friendly fire incident. He said that with the storm shadows and all the talk, and there's so much chatter on Russian channels about storm shadows, that there'll be a lot of jittery air defense systems, a lot of jittery operators, and also, potentially electronic warfare jamming. So jittery plus that, and you get people being a bit trigger happy and taking out their own aircraft is just a more likely explanation than Ukrainians having some kind of long range capability, although that is of course possible, but being able to take 5 out in 2 minutes is really much more difficult than one might think. Okay. That massive explosion in Ternopil, several things to say about this. There's all these claims from pro-Russian sources going around Russian threads, and in fact, some pro-Russians, some of the bots on my thread have been spreading the idea that there's a load of so Ternopil was blown up, or there's a big explosion in Ternopil, sorry, on the night of Eurovision, because the Ukrainian Eurovision contestants were from Ternopil. It's really far to the west, not too far from Lviv. That explosion was huge, and it looked like fuel rather than anything else, but might have been ammunition. Anyway, there are claims that there's loads of radiation around there, loads of gamma radiation, which some are saying is problematic because actually, if it was depleted uranium warheads, then they wouldn't. They would have alpha radiation. Yeah, it would be a little bit gamma, but there's a bit of sciencey speak involved that seems to conclude that it's unlikely that would have happened. I'd probably need to look into this a little bit more, but it looks very much sounds like your pro-Russian propaganda. Also, at the same time, a charity in Switzerland has revealed that explosion took out its own stores of supplies worth hundreds of thousands of francs. As you can see here, the bombing of Ternopil destroyed its aid being stored. Again, is this psyops? But this is actually a Swiss charity saying in Switzerland, hey, we've had our stuff blown up here. So there may have been a storage of a fuel depot next to a warehouse with that. I don't know what the details are. Something big certainly blew up, but it seems that it's also taken out some aid storage. Is there any evidence of radiation there? I don't know. We'll look into that. Okay, going on to odds and sods, just moving off hits and losses. Moving on to talk about Lukashenko. So this is the Belarusian leader that I was reporting yesterday is ill, saying, "Oh, has he been poisoned by the Russians because he was over in Russia for Victory Day and then came back rather ill?" Well, according to Belarusian opposition council member Pavlo Latushka, Lukashenko has infectious allergic myocarditis. Symptoms of this disease are shortness of breath, malaise, tachycardia, pain in the heart, and moderate pain in the joints. Um, so it could well be a genuine illness here. And in fact, yesterday he made a TV appearance in an attempt to show he is totally not dead. Belarus's Alexander Lukashenko makes his first appearance in nearly a week. Actually, he sounds really. So if you listen here, he sounds. I don't know.
Без великих докладов давайте посмотрим на то, что происходит вокруг нашей страны.
So he's short of breath and he's very hoarse as well. So he's not well. He is talking about Russian planes and helicopters shot down last weekend, seemingly confirming that this is not stock video to be released in his absence. In other words, he's definitely alive, and here is me saying something that timestamps this video. So I am alive. Not only does Lukashenko sound pretty hoarse, but the mysterious bandage. So he was seen yesterday as well with a bandage on one of his hands. The bandage has switched hands since it was first seen on Victory Day parade in Moscow a week ago. So he was evidently ill then as well, and he's still ill now. And bandage is changing hands. He's obviously on IV drips. All the latest on the mysteriously disappearing and reappearing Belarusian strongman from that source there. So yeah, he appears to be alive but not well. And it's likely that is a natural illness as opposed to the FSB having something to say about his existence. The FBI has arrested 2 Russians accused of supplying Russian airlines with parts for its planes. The New York Times reports Oleg Patsulia and a forger could face charges of violating US export controls. The EU are trying really hard to stop people getting around these sanctions. This is the US doing that as well. This is not in terms of countries kind of finding loopholes, but people actually breaking the law here. And that's really important to make sure that the sanctions are enforced. So good stuff, the US. Scott Ritter still being Scott Ritter. Meanwhile, in Russia, Scott Ritter continues his book tour, which he describes as his privilege and honor, as he's going around Russia touting his Russian propaganda. They're loving him for it because it's enemy attestation. It's like, oh, he's an American, and he's saying stuff that agrees with what we're saying, so it must be true. And it just makes them feel good about themselves. I think this chap shouldn't be allowed back in the US, really. Just like lock him out. You love him so much, you stay over there. And then we have the continuing love affair between Rishi Sunak and Volodymyr Zelenskyy. Apparently, afterwards they held hands, went for a walk through the meadows, and had a candlelit dinner at a local restaurant. And it was truly moving. The prospects are even more worrying, Skabayeva says, as she discusses the weapons Ukraine is getting. So this is actually, I'm going to talk to you about their meeting a little bit in just next, actually. But here we have Russian propagandists genuinely appearing to be a little bit worried about the Western weapons that are now being promised. So even before the official meeting, in addition to the Storm Shadow cruise missiles, Rishi Sunak have promised to give Ukraine hundreds more new long-range radar attack drones, over 200 kilometers, and hundreds more missiles for air defense. This is of what will be given right now. I think this is on top of the prospects are even more worrying. So this is a bit doom and gloom. Britain will begin training Ukrainian pilots as early as summer and will begin working with other countries on the possible supply of F-16s to Ukraine. Well, in conclusion, says the other anchor, I would like to say sometimes we hear some brave, excited statements like in one blow, Storm Shadow is nothing, HIMARS is nothing. As well, we should somehow avoid expressions like these because we should treat these issues of weapons and military equipment as seriously as possible. And combat of our troops, we really do need to prepare thoroughly and with necessary precautions. So we shouldn't succumb to bravado. I mean, that's absolutely bang on. There's just a bit of realism there from the Russian propagandists. So yeah, but it also if they're saying things like that, then you can bet your bottom dollar that the Russian military are a little bit perturbed about this, as you would be. Like, if I was a Russian military and like, okay, we're getting screwed over, we hardly got any tanks left and APCs, and we're getting T-55s out from storage and from being mothballed. Like, and now they've got Storm Shadows. Oh, brilliant. Oh, now they've got Patriot air defense systems. Oh, brilliant. And now they might be training on F-16s. Oh, brilliant. These are genuinely going to be concerns. Yes, they might hand wave them away on social media and stuff like that, but in reality, it's going to be a big concern to the Russians. Right, time for a cup of tea. Okay, tea break over. Now, we're on to military aid, humanitarian aid, financial aid, etc., etc. Zelenskyy has just got back. I believe he's back in Kyiv now from visiting. What did he do? Italy, France, Germany, UK. So did a lot of the big countries on the continent to get, obviously improve that relationship and get the aid that he really desperately needs. And those countries are all doing their very best, it seems, to give Ukraine what they need. And indeed, that might well include airframes as well. So Britain will start training Ukrainian pilots in the summer and is also working with other countries on a possible delivery of F-16s to Ukraine. The government of the UK made a corresponding statement. I'm glad to meet again the Prime Minister of Great Britain, Rishi Sunak. We continue to work for the victory of Ukraine. We'll see a little bit of what they had to say here. In fact, this is worth listening to. Let's make sure. Yep, it's somewhere.
But also to ensure that Ukraine has the means to do some.
Actually, we want to come to this, but
countries that provides that support to Vladimir.
Very important decisions, but we have to work a little bit more on it.
So he's talking about airframes.
Yes, look, we are going to be a key part of the coalition of countries that provides that support to Vladimir and Ukraine. Now, it is not a straightforward thing, as Vladimir and I have been discussing, to build up that fighter combat aircraft capability. It's not just the provision of planes, it's also the training of pilots and all the logistics to go alongside that. Now, the UK can play a big part of that. One thing we will be doing, starting actually relatively soon, is training of Ukrainian pilots, and that's something that we've discussed today. We're ready to implement those plans in relatively short order, which will mean that we're training Ukrainian citizens to become absolutely combat ready aircraft pilots, and particularly whether it comes to NATO tactics as well, because that's an important part of the long-term relationship between our countries. So we've had very good productive discussions on that today. Other countries are involved. I'm talking to those leaders. I'll be doing more of that this week in my international engagement, and we're very keen to build that coalition of countries to give Vladimir and his people the aircraft support that they need. And we remain.
So I thought that's pretty interesting. There's a couple of points here. As this person points out, citizens will be trained in the UK as pilots. Was that was he misspeaking, or was he actually taking people from scratch and training them to be pilots, not rather than taking experienced Ukrainian pilots and training them on F-16s? So, or would that be a problem to take pilots who are really well trained on these airframes and then retrain them on other airframes where actually that might not be a good use of those people? Then there's this idea of countries coming together to provide this kind of stuff. We've got NATO tactics as well being mentioned. So this is bringing Ukraine into the NATO fold. This is providing, hopefully, airframes at some point and the training for that. Now, this has prompted even people like Rebar, pro-Russian source here, to say, we agree with our colleagues from Obsessed with War that since the UK announced the opening of a training centre for training pilots to operate Western-made aircraft, then the training has been going on for a long time. The transfer of fighters such as the Typhoon is the next step in strengthening the combat capabilities of the Ukrainian forces, especially after the start of the use of British cruise missiles, Storm Shadows. British cruise missiles, due to their range and low visibility for air defense systems, are theoretically an effective means for strikes against Russian aircraft and helicopter bases in the rear. The plan seems to be that Ukrainian formations should suppress the air group of the Russian aerospace forces as much as possible and achieve success at the front in order to provide the most favourable conditions for bringing in Western fighters. This could all be true. It wouldn't surprise me at all if, we had already mentioned training NATO fighters like a couple of months back. So actually, I would agree with Rebuy here that, yeah, he says it's going to happen in short order. I think it probably is happening already, that training. How far along these countries are in providing airframes, I don't know. You can bet that there would have been conversations like this going on for months, though, already. And we've got, Zelenskyy talking about visiting all these countries, getting loads of support. We've got, I'll come on to that in a second. We've also got this idea that just to put paid to a rumor that might be going around, the outcome of the meeting between Rishi Sunak and Zelensky is that the UK will send hundreds of long-range missiles and armed drones to Ukraine to stop the launch on top of the Storm Shadow cruise missiles announced, said the BBC. But then it actually wrote a correction. Important, the BBC has corrected the article in line with earlier information. The UK will provide hundreds of air defence missiles, not long-range missiles. And in fact, they are providing long-range drones. And the idea of long-range drones is that they act like long-range missiles. So arguably there's not a lot of difference other than drones will be slower and easier to shoot down, arguably. So, but what I was listening to one analysis saying is that drones are far cheaper than missiles. And so if you can send a drone the same distance you can a missile and actually arguably get greater precision with a drone and attach different kind of warheads or different munitions to the drones, then they're basically doing the same as the missiles, arguably more accurate, and so on and so forth. So, but mainly a lot cheaper. So countries could be moving towards providing long-range drones rather than long-range missiles. That's just one analysis. Anyway, France has got, on the back of this, France is also saying, or Macron here saying that the door is open to train Ukrainian pilots on fighter jets. France has opened the door for training Ukrainian pilots on fighter jets. French President Macron said in an interview on May the 15th, the training can start now, he said. He told TF1, adding that it may be held with several other European countries who are also ready. So it looks like everyone's singing off the same song sheet here. Shashank Joshi from The Economist says that he missed this. Macron says that France will send long-range missiles to Ukraine as well. But then there's been challenge about this. Some people saying, actually, I've listened to the interviews. He's not sure he actually said that. He said that he will talk about missiles that will allow to resist Russia. It could well be air defense missiles rather than long-range missiles. So again, a little bit of confusion over what kind of missiles France might or might not be sending. Okay, moving on to other countries. So basically, this is huge news. Airframes it looks like we're a lot closer to airframes being given to Ukraine than we were a week ago. This is about communication, though. All that stuff would have been happening anyway. There'll be a reason why they're putting that in the public. It might be some kind of virtue signaling, but it's going to be an element of letting Russia know exactly what's going on for reasons that they will more likely know than we will. Okay, US made Abrams main battle tanks have been delivered to Germany. Here it says, they will deliver 31. Actually, there are other claims saying all 31 have been delivered to Germany, ready for the training for the Ukrainian soldiers on those pieces of kit, as well as to sort out the logistics and maintenance trails as well. So that is huge. If Ukraine requests it, USA is ready to deliver Iron Dome air defense system to defend against Russian missiles and drones, said Lieutenant General Kabler, the US Army's commanding general for space and missile defense, to the Senate last week, reports the Jerusalem Post. So there could be some even greater air defense capability in Ukraine in the coming months. The SAMP-T air defense system, jointly promised by Italy and France, has arrived in Ukraine. I think this is another one on top of what they already have. So that's fantastic. Czech Republic has called on partners to speed up the supply of weapons to Ukraine for the counteroffensive. He emphasized that deliveries should be made by the end of spring. So there's pressure coming from really strong allies there. Iceland has has given a field hospital, supported the transfer of a field hospital to Ukraine. So again, different types of aid are coming from different quarters. On the other hand, Hungary has blocked the allocation of a new €500 million tranche for Ukraine from the European Peace Fund. ANSA reports Budapest has demanded guarantees that the EPF will maintain its global horizon in the future, not be used solely to arm Ukraine. So this is the idea that funding and support for Ukraine shouldn't just be about Ukraine. It should be, as according to at least Viktor Orban here. It should be about, a wider strategy for Europe. Again, as has been the case with Viktor Orban and Hungary, it appears to be doing things that benefit Russia more than Ukraine, and also trying to leverage their own outcomes, things that they want. So there's lots of horseplay going on, I think, when it comes to Hungary and Viktor Orban. Putin has signed a decree allowing foreigners to obtain Russian citizenship in a simplified procedure. For a new passport, one would only need to sign a contract for military service and go fight near Bakhmut, for example. This is Russia's attempt to try and get more troops, effectively. You can much more easily get a passport. If you want to sign up for our military, you can become a Russian citizen. I mean, there's a 3 in 4 chance of you dying, but in that 1 in 4 chance that you survive, you can become a tax-paying citizen. I'm pulling that statistic out of my posterior, but you get the point here. They are in desperate straits for trying to get equipment and personnel, and this is just another way that they are trying to get their troops. To get more troops to the front line. So Russia's defense spending has increased by 282%, Reuters writes. In January and February 2023, Russia spent $26 billion on defense, which is a 282% greatest expenditure than in the same period in 2022. That is a sign, probably, that things aren't going too well. Right, moving on to geopolitics. As we've already seen, there has been a growing, beautiful relationship between Zelenskyy and Sunak. This is important because actually we had some political turmoil in the UK. We had Boris Johnson, who was very strong on Ukraine, and Ukrainians love Boris Johnson, and the UK was supporting Ukraine incredibly. Now, I don't know if that's really directly as a result of Boris Johnson, or whether that would have happened because of actually our military structure would be saying we really need to support Ukraine here. But I think Boris Johnson also was very strong rhetorically on Ukraine, and they loved him for that. And then he played up to that. So there was this kind of virtuous cycle that went on. Now, when he left office, because of all the lying and Partygate scandals and everything, lots of pro-Ukrainians and Ukrainians themselves were worried that actually British support might dwindle after that. And then we had, the chaos about who was going to be in charge. And then we eventually ended up with Rishi Sunak, who's not really he's more on the economy, being a former Chancellor of the Exchequer. He's not so big on, I guess, foreign diplomacy and things like that, but actually he's coming up with the goods now, and this is really good. So it is really positive that these two are forming, it seems, a relationship that will benefit Ukraine, and I think that's good news going forward. Right, the WHO, World Health Organization, is closing its Moscow office and transferring the work to Copenhagen. It's things like this that will end up hurting Russia. I could talk about things like Brexit hurting UK by point of fact the EU has pulled out loads of, so the science that the EU science organization was based in London, it now isn't. Loads of financial and other organizations were based in London, now moving to Frankfurt and Dublin and other places, and that hurts us. Whatever your position on Brexit is, it hurts when major organizations pull out, not only because of the influence you have with those organizations, but also the expertise and jobs they bring, and the money that brings to the cities like London. And we've had a load of these big organizations pulling out post-Brexit because actually we're not in the EU, so any kind of EU organizations that are based in the UK no longer should no longer be in the UK, so they're all pulling out, and that will have an effect. Now here you'll have not only corporations pulling out of Russia, but important organizations closing their offices, like the World Health Organization in this case, and that will hurt Russia going forward. Might not be huge, but you get lots of little things like that happening, and suddenly Russia is kind of isolated, and those people who have those expertise and the money that goes with that are now working somewhere else. Right. Republic of Moldova is about to leave the Russian-dominated Commonwealth of Independent States, or CIS. The first step, the withdrawal from the CIS assembly, has already been done. The next step is a formal termination of membership. The main reason is Russia's ongoing support of so-called Transnistria, which is currently occupying Moldovan territory in the east of the country. So, as you can see there, that's Transnistria on the east of Moldova. Russia is losing power in not only in this particular region, but also if you go further to the east in the Caucasus, they are losing that hard power and soft power all around the world. This war has been a real shot in the foot. They've shot themselves in the foot, and they will be reaping the not benefits of that decision for decades to come. Just terrible. Anyway, last piece. Georgia is resuming flights from Russia. So flights from Russia to Georgia, and they've been banned for almost 4 years. There's been some pressure on Georgia not to allow this to happen. It appears that is going to happen. It's reported by Imedi with reference to the statement of the head of the Civil Aviation Agency of Georgia, Dafetashvili. And that is the end of the news today. So quite a lot of news. Sorry I've been banging on. Please like, subscribe, and share. It seems like the viewership has ticked up this week, and I don't know why. And I think it's affected adverts. People are getting more adverts. I've not changed anything. Goodness me, I'm too busy to look at stuff like that. But thank you for all your support. I really appreciate all of you and all of your amazing comments. Please pop by again for the Frontline update and the news extra later today. Take care. Speak soon.